Well, good afternoon or good evening or good morning, wherever you are. My name is Jacob Quist. I'm affiliated with Delft University of Technology, but for today I will act as the host for the session on behalf of the organizing committee of the Global Knowledge Action Network on Sustainable Systems of Sustainable Consumption and Production, the conference entitled Transitioning to Systems of Sustainable Consumption and Production, from Knowledge to Action. And I'm very glad that today we have the next session. That's already the 8th online session that will is on the topic of impacts of trans-COVID on lifestyles and the implications for sustainability policy. That's been organized by a working group on the same topic that's affiliated with the SCORAI network. I don't say anything more, but I'm quite familiar. I'm really looking forward to the presentations, but I would like to hand it over to the session developer and the session chair, Professor Philip Vergragt. So Philip, the floor is yours and for all the presentations.
Okay, well, thank you, Jaco. It's always a pleasure to work with you. In the past, I used to be a professor of technology assessment at TU Delft, so I know Jaco from those days. I'm also a research professor at Clark University and one of the co-founders and board members of SCORAI, Sustainable Consumption Research and Action Initiative. And the title of today's session is Impact of COVID on Lifestyles and Implication for Sustainability Policy. So these are my introductory remarks. Let me see if I can move to the next slide. How do I do that? Oh, here. So here's the aim of the session. We basically want to summarize what we learned about the impacts of COVID on lifestyle changes and their permanence or their lack of permanence, the difference in impacts between countries and regions, the relevance of these findings for other external shocks. We are now in fuel prices and in the other forms of the energy transition, and ultimately what we learned about promoting sustainable lifestyles. How can we better harness opportunities through external shocks? A few housekeeping rules. We have 7 short 5-minute presentations from different perspectives and regions. I have to move away my these pictures of these people. Yeah. So during these presentations, you can ask questions in the chat box. So informative questions we can answer immediately after the presentation, maximum 2 minutes. I will keep time. A discussion question needs to wait. And after the presentations, Valerie will lead the discussion, assisted by myself, and I will keep track of the chat box questions. So a recording is underway. And we kindly ask you to mute yourself if you're not speaking, so during the presentations. Here are the 4 leading questions. So what did we learn from the COVID crisis? What did we observe about the longevity of these lifestyle changes? Do we understand better the conditions under which lifestyle changes become more permanent? Are these findings relevant for other external shocks? And which recommendations do we have for policymakers? And of course, each of the presenters will have their own perspective, and not everybody will address all those 4 questions, but they will also be up for discussion. So here you can see that we have a very distinguished panel of speakers from all over the world: Japan, China, Singapore, Israel, Latvia, Brazil, and US. And this is the program. I'm not going to elaborate on it, but you can see that each of these speakers will have 5 minutes, and each of them will introduce themselves. And by that, I will stop sharing my screen if I can, and hand it over to Arun. Arun, it is 4 o'clock where you are in the western part of the US, in Seattle. Welcome to the show, and thank you that you're here. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Philip. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Hello everyone. As Philip said, it's just after 4 in the morning here. My name is Arun Jan. I'm an urban designer and strategist for the last, let's say, about 37 years. I work across many different geographies in both the public and private sectors, and I'll give you a cross-section. I've been the chief urban designer for Portland, Oregon, and more lately, Bellevue, Washington. I've been a guest professor at TU Berlin. And currently, I'm assisting the Ministry of Urban Development in Northern Macedonia and a Think City group in Malaysia. Since our time allocations are short, let me begin. Although there's a growing sense of collective unease about how we are going to cope with what looks like an increasingly uncertain future, there's also a growing concern that many of us who worry about these things are still a minority, at least from the perspective of doing what's necessary to move beyond just worrying to some kind of meaningful action. Let me see. So I'm going to start by sharing William Gibson's refrain that the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed. And by this, I mean both the positive and the negative futures. And I think as human beings, we tend to selectively pick both good and frightening examples without fully acknowledging that any one of them could become the dominant characteristic for all of us. Let me assert that COVID did two big things. Number one, it amplified all the discontinuities that existed before COVID. You'll see inequities, our sense of security, social justice, health, the environment, and all kinds of digital issues about privacy and so on, and of course the climate. But it did a second thing. It actually caused entirely new and unexpected discontinuities or disruptions. And so now our perception of work-life balance, the cost of energy, inflation, supply chains, war, and all reflected in some form of social unease and disturbing political trends. I'll argue here that this bundle, let me see, did I get everything? I'm going to put everything on the screen here. It's hampered our ability to transcend uniform approaches and remedies. And I'll also argue that our global attitude to COVID has now become like, oh, it's just like influenza. It's deadly, but a manageable condition. And this is now making us not only complacent, but taking us very quickly back to pre-COVID discontinuities rather than pushing to correct them. And by this, I mean, we don't really know what our new work-life balance is going to be. And our old assumptions of commute patterns, strategies for regions to remain resilient and vital, our concept of risk and exposure, and the balances, for example, between city cores and suburbia. Are city cores still important? How does that balance actually work? All of that adds up to me to say there's been a loss of momentum and opportunity for positive change, which is how I put a positive spin on COVID as an opportunity. And so the bigger background question of what is our new normal and how are we going to adapt to it remains. I think, again, I'll put all these up on the screen. I think the underlying questions are how are we going to grow and yet consume less? And at the core of this question is really, what is our definition of growth? Is it about more consumption, or is it about something that's more quality of life, and how would we define that? And more importantly, how would we embed that into whatever constituency we're trying to talk to or cause any positive change? How are we going to deal with mass disruptions and related migrations? Now, these are both very different realms, of course, but the idea that mass disruptions are already in front of us. And I think migrations are just a matter of time before we start seeing climate migrations and other disruptive reasons. And then what does climate adaptation mean for cities in the light of this kind of uncertain background that's, let's say, instigated by COVID, but not only? And then for me, the biggest professional question is, how do we soften the blow for the most vulnerable in our societies? And so what I would offer you is that there's really a number of inconsistencies between what citizens need and what they expect, what societies can or try to do, what technology is able or wants to do. Some often, as we know, it promises way more than it can actually legitimately claim. And how do international agreements translate to local action? I translate global aspirations like SDG 11 and the New Urban Agenda, both of which I worked on.
So Arun, your time is up, so please try to round up in a minute or so. Okay.
So I won't dwell on this too much, but these are the 4 or 5 aspects that influence what we're doing. We're adapting to energy shifts, to infrastructure recalibration and investment, new social and political defaults, and systemic change. And I'm going to offer and conclude with these 4 possible approaches. One is that we need better ways to cope with likely collapses. We need more radical approaches. We need to consider technology as just a tool and not a solution. And the last point is that we need to embrace the positive disruptive forces at play. And let me leave you with some bullets. One is social entrepreneurship. The other is participatory budgeting, sharing economies, crowdsourced policymaking, embedded and engaged infrastructure, and then behavior-based decision tools. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arun. So please stop sharing your, I'll leave it on for a moment. Are there any questions for clarification at this point? Well, thank you very much, and we will very much come back to you in during the discussion. So the next speaker is Kira Mates from Hong Kong. Please, Kira, introduce yourself and share your screen.
That seems to be working. Okay.
Yes.
So I'm Kira Mates. I'm a professor of public policy and environment and sustainability at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. I am also on the board of SCORAI and part of the KAN, the SSCP KAN, among other things. So I hang out or see a lot of you in a lot of different venues. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Hong Kong. Let me just expand all the way here. So Hong Kong, this is kind of a bit of a more factual approach after Arun's good kind of conceptual layout. And I think sometimes as I've been thinking about this, I think about Hong Kong as both the potentials and limitations of infrastructure. So first of all, Hong Kong has had some of the strictest COVID policies in the world if we think about duration. So we never had a lockdown, but we've had very long periods of restrictions. Even what we now consider to be fairly low restrictions is more than almost anyone else. We still can't go out without masks or inside without masks, and all kinds of vaccine passes and contact tracing and mandatory quarantines and so on still in existence. So these very strict measures we had for a long time, including various very strong limitations on restaurant opening hours and dining in and such, took place even for the 8 months we had 0 COVID cases. So we had strong COVID measures and very little COVID. One of the questions is about multiple shocks. And in the case of Hong Kong, I would argue that we have had multiple shocks, but ours were in the other order from what most of my colleagues here are discussing. And that is because 2019 set us up with a massive pro-democracy protests, and those both depressed the local economy in terms of tourist impacts, but more importantly, fractured trust in the city between the government and large swaths of the population, but also in kind of a 50-50 split of pro and anti government kind of camps, which still remains. And so Hong Kong started 2020 in a very problematic and vulnerable and low trust state. And I think it's important to consider as we think about impacts. So in terms of just some very basic studies we've been doing about behavioral change, the first thing is that in Hong Kong has one of the best public transport systems in the world. 95% of trips on any given day, 90 to 95, are taken on public transport. Most of the people who don't use public transport are because they're just beyond the edges and they have to somehow get to the edge of the bus system. So it remained the #1 commuting mode. Public transport use did drop very dramatically in periods where the government, schools, and many office places were on work from home. That wasn't mandatory, but people tended to follow the lead of the civil service and the schools, etc. And it bounced almost right back. And in terms of private car commuting, the increase was very small, 1%. And there's no real evidence that is COVID related as opposed to just a general kind of slow growth. In terms of, in terms of housing, we also have very little change in housing patterns. Hong Kong has no suburbs. Hong Kong is a city with a hard international border. So what movement, and it's very dense, and we have a lack of land supply, and people tend to get locked into their either public housing or their bought apartments for a generation. So there was some increase in demand amongst the kind of renters who have the means to some of the more outlying areas and villages, but the number of units even available is very small. So we mostly see high city center rents declining, home prices declining, and commercial real estate occupancy down. Why? Not because people were out migrating within Hong Kong to suburbs. It's because we had a net outflow of residents, full stop. Over 140,000 people, most, if not many of them, kind of middle to upper income, highly educated professionals, including a large swath of our teaching population, have left Hong Kong, mainly for the UK, Canada, and Australia, as a result of events in 2019. So this is the double shock. We have actual population decrease. Some of the commercial decrease also has to do with changes to tourist retail housing. Okay, why am I not able to? This was working before. I'm part of a fashion survey. So we were very interested in what this did for people's clothing. Like, how did months and months of not going out? Bars were closed, restaurants were closed. There was nowhere to go that was fancy, and Hong Kongers like to go out and bar hop and dine and see and be seen. And we know retail was down, but that's very difficult to disaggregate from the total collapse of our tourist industry. Hong Kong is a retail destination for South Asia and also for our neighbors across the border in Shenzhen and other parts of southern China. So we know that fashion and retail was way down, but it was hard to say how much of that was local behavior versus just losing the shopping tourists. And we have some surveys out that indicate, at least during the first year or so, 2020, maybe into 2021, people were buying less. They were changing what they bought. They were interested in clothing that was more washable and durable because they're very concerned with coming home and washing off their clothes. So sanitation and washability became very important. That in turn has at least an anecdotal drop in secondhand sales, like on secondhand sales platforms, because people were just unwilling to take the perceived risk of buying something they didn't know where it was from, where other people had been wearing it, etc. So there's actually a cultural thing here too.
So your 5 minutes are up, so please try
okay,
to.
so I'll go to the very end. So if I can make my slides go down. And and we kept and so what I would say is that the big trend here then was accelerating as well, and kind of dining and takeout, accelerating delivery, which was growing. So my insights here is that we know after SARS what was sticky, and it was mostly about sanitation and health, a bit more hiking and outdoor activity. But almost everything learned from SARS was gone by 2020. And I think that we'll see the same kind of thing where there'll be a slow resumption, moving back to normal amounts of retail, moving towards normal housing patterns, transportation holds steady. And a lot of that is just the constraints of what change is possible in a short period of time in Hong Kong. There is a bit more work from home, but culturally, once again, it's a very face-to-face culture. And so once it was safe to do so, people prefer to do so. And so I think we see very little sticky change here in Hong Kong so far.
Thank you, Kira. This is very insightful and very interesting. Are there any informative questions at this point? If not, we will come back to it later in the discussion. Janis Briska from Latvia is the next speaker. Janis, the floor is yours. I will put 5 minutes time clock for you also in.
Yes, thank you. Hello again. My name is Janis Briska from University of Latvia. We've been working on this presentation together with my colleague Maris Juras from Riga Technical University, and here we have several also students in a classroom participating in the conference. So it's a group of people. We've been looking at some of the data related to the transport and mobility impacts of the COVID during the last few years. There've been several studies around the world looking similarly at these data and results. Transport in Latvia is the second largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, and even if we have a good public transportation system in Riga city, there is poor connections between the towns, and especially in rural areas. And people are generally trying to use more private transport than compared to the public transport. Due to COVID pandemic, more people began working from home. We also have some of the reasons statistics looking at this. In 2020, 12% of employees across EU worked from home, and rather similar results are also in case of Latvia. It's crucial to create robust and sustainable transportation systems, and some other ideas being circulated around the studies on COVID impact on transportation and mobility in different towns and cities. I'm just going rather quick through the presentation so that you, Philip, don't have to stop me and say that time is up. We looked at how the COVID has influenced the economic performance in Latvia, and we don't really see big disruptions. GDP per capita GDP growth been steady. The same with employment and salaries. So COVID didn't really have a big economic impact in terms of.
Janis, we don't see your slides. We only see the first. I only see the beginning of your slides, but they don't move.
Oh, sorry. I don't know why is that. I try to share again. Do you?
Yeah, or maybe Jen can share the slides. So if you, oh, there you are. Right.
Now you see.
Yes.
Okay. So this is a slide about the economic and about the salaries. So the next slide is about the impact on remote work. We were.
You don't see it, Janis.
I don't know what's happening. I
propose you stop sharing, and we will ask Jan to share. Oh, here you are. Okay.
I can share it like that. Then it will not be full screen, but at least you can see it. Okay, sorry for that. So yeah, about the economic growth, we don't really see the significant decrease in GDP or salaries. Looking at the remote work and fuel use, we can really see the correlation there. With lockdowns, which were several times introduced in Latvia, remote work increased, and fuel consumption generally decreased in Latvia. So there's a kind of pattern we can identify here. We also looked at the Google mobility data, which been collected for 2020, 21, and 22, and we can see several patterns here. Use of public transportation significantly decreased, 18, 22, 25%, and minus 17% in 2020. The same decreased the people, how much time they spend at work. So people were working more remotely. So there is around 20% decrease. We can also see significant.
1 more minute, Janis.
Okay. We can also see significant increase in use of nature spaces. Yeah, visiting parks has doubled, and even more in 2022. So these are some of the results from Google data. If we look quarterly at the public transportation use, we see very significant decrease in the use of buses and other public modes of public transportation. And this is not really coming back also in 2022, when there is no lockdowns and COVID is almost gone. We don't have any restrictions currently. So my conclusions are that COVID pandemic only slightly had only very small impact on economics and jobs, but significantly decreased the use of public transportation and also use of private cars, and stimulated the remote working. Now looking at the increasing energy crisis and increasing fuel costs, the mobility is still very low, so it's not very easy to see this recovery. And on some of the questions which Philip, you asked about this session, so these external shocks provide several windows of opportunity for lifestyle change, which could be used by policymakers and activists, but I don't really see how we've been actively using them for positive change. So that's my short presentation, and looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janis, and your colleague also. Any informative questions at this point? Please use the chat box if you have anything that comes up for discussion or for informative question. Thank you. The next speaker is Lei Zhang from Beijing in China. Lei, the floor is yours.
Okay.
Please introduce yourself.
Okay. Thanks, Philip. This is Zhang Lei from Beijing. I work at university called the Renmin University of China in the School of Environment and Natural Resources. The most relevant work with this session is I have been serving as the coordinator for SCORAI China. So we are working with a group of researchers in the field of sustainable consumption. Very glad to have this opportunity to share with you the case of Beijing Mass. Actually, it's one of the cases we started within the project called Digital Platform-Driven Urban Mobility Green Transitions. So this is a case very much followed the model initiated by the Beijing government, but the other cases could be initiated and operated by different types of actors. But this one is very interesting. Okay, let me see what it's not going. Okay, so first few words about Beijing. This is a very big city. You can see large areas, looks like a very, very big courtyard. So in the very middle, it's Forbidden City that you go round. Actually, we have the 7th Ring Road, but almost 80% of the population live within the 6th Ring Road. And Beijing also represents one of the most developed cities in China. If you look at the GDP per capita, yeah, the roads in the city are always full. Actually, nowadays, it's not easy to get a new plate number. So it's not really like you can buy anytime you like a car. But talking about private cars, that's really something the government has been trying to intervene in recent years for different purposes, because although about 30% by private cars, this part generates over 70% of carbon emission. That's why both from the environmental department and the transportation department are trying to do something. But interesting thing is, even before COVID-19, in Beijing, we already see the increasing use of we call it shared bikes, and also increasing use of online ride hailing. That means more and more people are used to using internet or with smartphones. This is really a very important condition for what's coming next. As I said before, COVID-19 already, most people are using different apps for different services. But now, right after these 2 or 3 years, we see as a result of COVID-19 and also government's commitment to realize carbon neutrality, the emergence of MaaS model. Here, MaaS refers as kind of mobility distribution model that deliver users' transport needs through a single interface of service provider. Maybe many of you have experienced different modalities of MaaS. Actually, if you look at this field all around the world, basically you find more this kind of MaaS in European countries and also in US. But really, those practices within China was not really studied and reported. This is why we really want to bring this story to this picture, because globally, this is kind of paradigm shift from MOD, we call it, to MaaS to achieve this kind of goals. But in Beijing, what happened is in around 2019, actually that's before the breakout of COVID-19. Actually, the Beijing mayor, he happened to read the literature on MaaS, so he actually ordered the Beijing Transport Institute to go for further study about the feasibility to have MaaS in Beijing. So from there, you had already the very strong political support from the top management of Beijing. Then they made everything possible for data sharing from bus, actually from the public transportation systems. So
can you round up in a minute, Lei?
Yeah,
please?
I will do it.
Yeah.
So this figure actually shows since end of 2019 up to now, already they went through this kicking off phase and now finished the MaaS or 1.0 version. So they're at this moment going for a more integrated model for MaaS in Beijing. So here shows just the steps you have to go through if you use MaaS in Beijing. Okay, so far a lot of evaluations already done from different actors. So they did evaluation every year to see how many people are registered and how many of them are actually participated in using this kind of public services, and also what kind of services can be integrated in future. But the challenge, actually, one of the main challenges is how to make this business modes to be self-sustained, because so far it's very public interest oriented. In response to those questions, I really see two very positive momentum. One is COVID, another one is Chinese government's commitment to carbon neutrality. This is give a lot of pressure to the local government to work on MaaS. And also, here we didn't see the high gas prices. any really impact on the people's behaviors. But I really see, even in other cities in future, if you really want to make mass more successful, you need this kind of integration from government, business operators, and the participation of the residents, and how to develop those legal bases will be another big issue. But the Beijing case really shows this is one of the ways we can do it in Chinese cities. Actually, in other cities, we see different models, but I'm not going to go further here. Okay, back to you, Philip.
Thank you, Lei. So very interesting case from China. And maybe you can stop sharing your screen. And any informative questions for Lei at this point? I don't see anything in the chat either. So we will move to the next presentation, which is from Tomohiro Tasaki from Japan, now working in Washington, D.C. Tomo, the floor is yours. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you for introducing me. I'm Tomohiro Tasaki. I'm a head of the one of the research section at the National Institute for Environmental Studies. Today, in my presentation, I'd like to try to answer the question why teleworking rate is so low in Japan. Actually, since our research team, research group, SCORAI, trans-COVID group, I've asked this kind of question several times, and luckily, I'm having a sabbatical in a 1-year sabbatical in Washington, D.C. Personally, I also experiencing the different teleworking style. So I'd like to try to answer this question. As you can see here, on the top right-hand side, teleworking rate sharply increases the first wave of the COVID pandemic, then decreased to some extent. Then, as you can see here, regardless of the second, third wave of the pandemic, teleworking rate unchanged. So, how Japanese workers react to this thing? Okamura Corporation conducted a 2 survey for the replaceability of the task at work. 70% of the Japanese worker answered half of the chats unreplaceable, and a bit more than 50% of the workers answered half of international meetings unreplaceable. I agree with the chat is unreplaceable, but you know, internal meeting, yes, it can be more replaceable from my experience in working in Japan, the US. And Goto and Hamano reviewed 17 survey on teleworking in Japan. Respondents who experienced teleworking showed several disadvantages and advantages of teleworking. The largest disadvantage of teleworking in Japan was difficulties in communication at work and with coworkers. This difficulty can be divided into 2 aspects. One is less information was obtained through the teleworking. And the second, it's teleworking reduces the frequency of communication and make the casual communication difficult. So even in the US, I have to make an effort to plan a small chat, etc. So it's this understandable. But what is the first reason is raised in Japan? This can be explained the cultural characteristics. There are 2 famous surveys on cultural difference. One is the Inglehart's World Survey. The second is the Yard-Hofstede 6 dimension. On top of that, Ellen Mayer published her book entitled as a Cultural Map. She added another dimension, it's communicating, whether the country is high context or low context. As you can see here, Japan is one of the highest context culture. which means good communication in sophisticated, nuanced, and layered. So message both spoken and read between the line. So Japanese worker, not only to understand what others says, but also understand the way of talking, kind of a small movement on the other face, or etc. Another cultural characteristic is summarized in this slide. Actually, I should share this URL for you later. I'll put on the chat box for this URL. One of two features can be seen from this slide: masculinity and uncertainty avoidance. As you can see, the world average compared with the world average just above the Japanese data, Japan has a high. These figures are very high. So what is the meaning? Masculinity in this sense, masculinity can be regarded in this sense as a kind of a loyalty to the company. So this can be interpreted as obeying the order from executives is taken for granted for Japanese workers. And Japanese workers tend to hesitate to make a new rule to avoid the uncertainty or possible responsible in the future. So this could be the reason. So my answer to the question raised by the my friend researchers, why Japan is having so low rate of teleworking is a cultural aspect. To some extent, cultural aspects can be explained: communication and transformability. And how about the longevity of these kind of the changes? In such a country with Japan, I think formation of a new rule is a key to ratcheting. I mean, a key to not to reverse to the old normal. But unfortunately, yes, Japanese organization intend to be slow to making the new rule. So we need to promote a kind of deep changes. That is my recommendation for the fourth question of this session. It's difficult to how to say what is a shallow change, deep change, but try to make deep change happen on occasion of external changes. That is my recommendation. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, Tom, a very, very important conclusion, and thank you very much. And I see that there's a question for you in the chat box from Paul Dewick. Paul, maybe you want to ask it yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Philip. I just wondered, thank you for that. All really interesting presentation so far. I just wondered, Saki, whether the type of technology used had made any difference. So we do have different tools available, and they've progressed quite a quite a bit, I think, in over this time period. I wonder if that had made any sort of difference.
Yeah, there's actually this difference in especially a soft technology like a software, as you can see, Zoom, Teams, these kind of the platform for collaborative working. I think introduction rate of the Japanese company on these kind of the software is lower than the Western countries. That's my impression, but we should check the precise data.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other quick questions? If not, we have the last but not least but one speaker, Janine de Madeiros, together with Arthur Marcon. Janine, the floor is yours. Please introduce yourself.
Yes.
Hello. There you are.
Oh, but it's in the end. It's in the end.
And you want to start with the beginning. Yeah.
Here. Okay. Could you see my presentation?
Well, this is yeah. Good.
Okay. Oh, I can't. Wait a minute. when we start today, I try and it's okay now, isn't it? Happens. Well, everybody are seeing?
Yes.
It's okay?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Janine. I am a marketing professor at the University of Passo Fundo and a researcher at the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul. This presentation was prepared by myself and my colleague Arthur, both from the research group on innovation and sustainability at URGS, and addresses the impact of COVID on the lifestyle of Porto Alegre residents, and as well as the consequences that the change brought to sustainable consumption and production. To begin, we consider it important to present a brief summary of the city. Porto Alegre is the capital of the state of Rio Grande do Sul in the southern region of Brazil. It has around 1,500,000 inhabitants and a GDP around $12,000 per person. However, it's important to highlight that in Brazil we have a real gap among social classes. Therefore, we have a significant number of people who receive much less than 12,000 in the month. Seeking to answer how has the COVID pandemic affected the city, we divided our analysis into 5 dimensions: work, retail, mobility, housing, and leisure and entertainment. As for the impacts on work, it's important to highlight that a low percentage of the population was able to maintain work activities at home, around 11% of the formally employed population. With the control of the disease, many organizations return to work in person or in a hybrid way. Regarding the impact on retail, there was a significant growth of e-commerce. Many small businesses also closed their doors. Those that survived have to reinvent their business practices during the most critical period, and from this we observed that the trend called omnichannel is here to stay. In terms of mobility, the main impact that we observed was the fall in the use of public transport and the increase in the consumption of cars apps. In terms of housing, we can describe 2 impacts. The first one focuses on the increase in the homeless population, and the second, which occurred in the population with high purchasing power, focuses on the increase in demand for houses with green area, green spaces. Finally, with regard to the impacts on leisure and entertainment, we found that there was an increase in the offer of virtual services like theater sessions, shows, and subscriptions to streaming channels. Still, many people began to exercise in public space. Seeking to analyze the effect of COVID on production and consumption in the city, we highlight that we see a loss of income in all social classes, that people who continue to work at home prefer to carry out other activities in nearby areas, that people want faster product deliveries, a conflict in the population about buy local or global products, an increase in the use of cars by apps and bikes, and an increase in the number of motorcycles too. And finally, we realized that there was an appropriation of public spaces for different use by the population and a rediscovery of the city's cultural space. Well, and to finish, what do we expect for the future? First reflection, what have we learned about the effect of COVID on changing lifestyles? From the perspective of research on consumer behavior, we understand that the crisis caused by COVID has brought out very strongly two behavioral trends supported by theory of evolutionary biology: self-interest and herd effect. In summary, researchers in the marketing area understand that the changes in lifestyles were due to the instinct of survival and imitation of the majority. Another point visible to researchers centers on the influence of negative emotions, especially fear and worry. Second point, how durable are the observed changes? Again, based on the analysis of theories related to consumer behavior, we infer that lifestyle change related to utilitarian needs, such as online shopping, frequent transport via app, preference for nearby physical stores, tend to stay longer. On the other hand, change related to hedonic needs, pleasures needs, tend to have a short duration in our perception. And to conclude, which recommendations do we distill out of this research? We need agile politicians and active global institutions. We need a global guidance guidebook, which, for example, has clear steps on what to do, how to do it as crisis levels change. And we need to control the spread of fake news. In Brazil, we suffer a lot with the spread of fake news. They described isolation guidelines, adherence to vaccines, especially in children. So we need policies to control this. And in our opinion, it's urgent.
Thank you, Jenny. It's very interesting view from Brazil. And there are two questions in the chat box. One from Arun. Maybe Arun, you want to ask it yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Janine. That was very interesting. You pointed out a number of trends as a result of COVID, and I can't help but wondering, are these permanent trends, or how long do you expect them to continue before you get back to something else?
Continue the change that
happen? Yes, the current trends, like increase in online purchases, more homeless, increased streaming use, loss of income, all of those factors that you brought up. Those, are they permanent changes, or do you think they'll move in a different direction?
Well, we think that some changes stay here, like like e-commerce and omnichannel, remote work. People prefer to work out. It's very particular here. We observed that people prefer to work in the places, not at home. So it was a change that happened when the pandemic, it was here, but don't survive, in our opinion, because people really want to go out, and a lot of people could work at their homes because they don't have technology support to do this. So the trend that stay here, it's e-commerce. It's really personal here. But other trends, other changes in the lifestyles do not survive. It's like we talked to you about our market analysis. When we think about the needs, we see that utilitarian needs, they have to stay more longer than pleasure needs. People start to travel a lot, people start to go out a lot, to do parties, and so the change that we observed and that have some effect in the behavior, in the consumption behavior, do not stay very longer. because people want to go out, want to buy things, and it's sad to observe that, but it's a reality.
Thank you, Janine. There was another question by Paul.
Thank you, Philip. Yes, I was just trying to get an idea of the absolute numbers that had been shifted onto the street, because they really are the most vulnerable, particularly in a time of a pandemic. But I also would welcome your reflections on the difference in people's perhaps optimism or confidence that things are going to get better as a result of your change in leader. We see him at the UN climate conference at the moment.
Do you want to be brief, Janine, please?
I don't understand the question. Sorry, but I really don't.
Okay.
We can pick up the question about the absolute numbers of people on the street later. Perhaps just some reflections on your new president, Lula, and whether there is confidence among people about whether he's going to address some of these effects of COVID. It's just that we see him in the UN climate conference, talking about how Brazil is going to have a different approach towards deforestation and climate change. Yeah, so I just wondered about that.
Well, first, I'm very happy with Lula's election. It's important for us, but it's important to tell you that we have some problems here in Brazil. We have a part of the population, the right wing of the population, that it's very the word is worry, not worry, is insane, and they are doing some things very like Nazi German here. For an example, I have a star and I don't vote in Bolsonaro. I don't talk Bolsonaro is the best. So these people are doing something like this, especially here in the southern of Brazil. Put a star, because PT symbol, it was a star, it's a star. Put a star on your star now. Something like this is happening here. We have a lot of people in the streets asking for militaries to get the power. So it's a period not, it's a conflict time here in Brazil now. But the perspective is that when Lula get the power, the things will be changed for better. The environment issues will be respected again, because nowadays sustainable issues are not respected. I work with my research in sustainable environmental area, and we don't have any respect, because these people, these right-wing people, don't agree. They think that these things will not happen. And when we was living in the apps of the COVID pandemic, a lot of people here told that, isn't it like we are talking? And so fake news was terrible, and they believed that people not die.
Sorry to interrupt you, Jenny. This is so interesting. In the US, we of course recognize a lot of this, and I'm sure in other countries also. But I have an eye on the clock, and so I apologize. So this, and I also, well, I thank all the speakers so far, because they kept all very nicely within their 5 minutes, which is extremely challenging for such complex issues. But I really want to give the floor to Valerie Vergragt, who I forgot to mention is my co-organizer of this session and the co-chair of this group. She's from Israel. And Valerie, please, Jan, maybe you can share Valerie's presentation. And Valerie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's always fascinating to learn
Can you see
about
it?
what's happening in different countries. And introduce myself, I'm a policymaker. I come from 35 years experience in central government, and today I'm a researcher and a lecturer in sustainability policy at Tel Aviv University. I've been working with the working group in SCORAI, and we got together, actually it was even before COVID, and then COVID came upon us and we asked ourselves what's happening. And it has been a fascinating story to look at what's happening in different countries around the world and now ask ourselves, post-COVID, are we really after it? And what is now staying with us, and reflect on what we did benefit from and what we've lost. Maybe we've lost the opportunities of a crisis. So if I go to the next slide, please. The next slide? Thank you. Well, during COVID and even now, we're talking about, is there a new normal? Well, the new normal was particularly affected by acceleration of digitalization. So anything that was related to moving to a more digitalized economy, whether it was work, or whether it was retail, or whether it was streaming, anything that was related to digitalization has accelerated, and it seems to be staying. But that's not the same around all countries of the world. So particularly, it's interesting to look and see where changes have happened and where perhaps they haven't. If we were just looking at information data that was coming in from US and Europe, we would see that it was the remote work that jumped very significantly with major increases. But that's not what's happened in Japan, as we've heard from Tomo. That's not what's relevant in Brazil, and that's not what's happened in Hong Kong. Possibly dwelling size didn't enable people to work from home, but it was particularly related to whether there were a high proportion of population whose employment could go to remote work, whether there was a culture that was open to remote work. And therefore we have had different results and different impacts in different countries. And that has affected the ongoing implications of those changes in terms of choice of residential location and mobility patterns, as we've heard that now from in Riga. So where we've had significant changes that are related to digitalization, that are remote work related, that are a choice of residential location to enable people to work from home, where working from home was possible, that seems to be staying with us. And that has resulted in sprawl, residential sprawl going out of cities, and it's resulted in the lower use of public transportation and a higher use of private cars. Next slide. Next slide. It depends on what the occupation is. We can expect more remote work to come in from those occupations where it is easy and most relevant to do so. But it seems that people prefer hybrid. And therefore, what is happening, and we're seeing is sticking, is not fully remote work, but a hybrid situation where actually people want to go in 2 or 3 days in the middle of the week, and they're working from home on Mondays and Fridays. And there is a hybrid situation, so they're not separating completely from their work location. Where remote work has come in, it has particularly affected the search for more affordable and larger properties in urban outer areas, causing urban expansion, and has also significantly impacted on whether people use public transport. Next slide, please. there were opportunities for change. There was a change of lifestyle to the home, to the neighborhood, to seeing people, how people changed the way in which they saw public spaces. But apart from the fact that there is a likelihood all around the world for keeping more attention to health and well-being, but many of the changes that in fact we had and experienced during the 2 years of COVID, we've actually lost them. Next slide, please. One of the main reasons why we have lost it is that the recovery stimulus packages, even if they were called green, they actually revived consumer expenditure because the purpose was to revive consumer demand, stimulate economic growth and get people back into employment. So we've had Black Friday rather than a greening situation. Consumerism returned with some differences, as we've heard. Online delivery, omni-channel, the retail has changed in using digitalization, but basically the stimulus and recovery packages changed the lifestyles back to pre-COVID and to the consumer economy. Next slide, please. So the main post-COVID changes that we see, which may be less sustainable, is particularly related to mobility. We heard on public transport's down. It's down in many areas of the world. It's particularly down in California, but it's down in all over the US, all over the Europe, to some extent in Japan, not in Hong Kong, as we've already heard, and not relevant to Brazil, but the GCMR, the Google data, which has stopped now from the 15th of October was the last data they're reporting, but they have been showing us, and they still show us, that transit and workplace is down. Therefore, we have lost out on public transport. We need to get that back. We've lost out on urban affordable, and we've lost out on making urban areas more compact. People have sprawled out to larger properties and moved out to small towns. Because it's hybrid, they'll still be in a commuting area, but it's out of town. Next slide, please. So my question now is, why did we lose the opportunities? There were opportunities. The digitalization has stayed and will stay, but there were other opportunities and we've lost them. Did we lose them because we weren't interested in them? Did we lose them because we weren't prepared? We didn't have models. We were satisfied too easily when the emissions went down and when the packages were called green. But actually what we needed were to develop and promote alternative models, exactly like Lei has presented to us as mobility as a service. This was an opportunity. They caught it. They were prepared. They had the opportunity. They caught the mobility as a service. We missed neighborhood management. There was focus on neighborhood. We missed it. China had community grids in neighborhood areas. We missed the public spaces instead of cars. And we've missed new provisioning systems. So perhaps we actually have missed opportunities, and we should learn from that what perhaps we need to do when an opportunity arises next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. It's very interesting summary. So we have 2 questions, I think, or 3, and then I would like to open the floor for a more general discussion. So, Arun, you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you, Philip. Valerie, as you well know, a lot of these numbers and trends are essentially coming from things we can measure, but there are a lot of things we cannot measure. And so my question is really about, let's say in many situations and countries, let's talk about the lower 80% or 60%, whatever that high percentage is, and that deals with service-related jobs. So we can talk about the problems of density in cities and migration to suburbs and all of that. But people who are living on the lower economic strata or service-oriented jobs where they have to be present, where they're cleaning the garbage or serving coffee or whatever the case may be, don't have those options that are being talked about in the trends. What do you think we ought to be doing in order to capture that data? And do you have any information on how it's working for that segment of people?
There was one trend which possibly may be beneficial exactly to the population who are in difficulties in finding affordable properties, because people moved out of the center of the cities to find larger affordable properties in the outer suburbs. And because offices reduced their floor space in the central area and some office floor space became vacant, there have been proposals that there should be a reorganization or a change to mixed use and land use, that office properties could be redeveloped for residential purposes, and particularly with an emphasis on enabling them to be transformed to affordable housing in the central area. I've seen those as proposals in order to provide more affordable housing in more central areas. I'm not sure that it's actually happening. It's not happening here in Israel, and I'm not sure if it's happening around the world.
It's not. And part of the reason, there are complex reasons, of course, but part of the reason is that there's a huge time lag between policy and translation of that policy, and it's underwritten by adequate funds, infrastructure, and regulatory barriers and things like that.
I will counterpoint a slight example, which is that I at least announced, we'll see where it goes to. Housing is a continual problem in Hong Kong, especially at the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum. And if you've seen these specials on cage houses and so on, it's frequently highlighted. And the speed and severity with which COVID ripped through these low income, rather dire, like really problematic housing situations, and actually created a need to create these massive quarantine camps. They're actually finally trying to come up with proposals for interim housing to quickly get people into perhaps bare bones, but creating a pipeline to get people out of there at a much faster pace than they have ever legitimately considered before. So it did expose something in Hong Kong that everyone knew it was there, but it put it so front and center that it has actually had some policy bite at the lower end. And to the point where they're talking about making developers give back parcels of land that might have become super high end. We'll see where it goes, but it was an interesting push that did happen. But it's only one very small example, and it doesn't help with the service job problem, right, of working remote work.
So we have a question from Jaco, not so much a question, but a comment or two comments. Jaco, you want to talk about it briefly?
Yeah, well, just very shortly. So I was responding to the Black Friday remark and said actually we need to, we should move towards concepts like a Green Friday. We also have the concepts like a Veggie Friday or Veggie Monday, So that would call for absolute reframing of some of the terms and concepts that we are using. And I was also quite disappointed by the final comparison, and as well as the remark that countries were not ready. So I've been looking through all of the, so that actually brings me to another point, and that's a question actually for the presenters here. So we have it about transforming to sustainable consumption production. We thought we could learn or build on what's been experienced during the COVID, taking the good things out of a terrible period. But now it seems that's getting back to way too much back to normal. So on the one hand, governments were not ready to take advantage or put that into action. So my question would be, what would be needed to put this knowledge into action, to bring it into implementation, and what can we do, or what is needed to make governments aware? So in the Netherlands, we have seen that governments were just, okay, letting the pandemic come and respond as late and as little as possible, only solving the main impacts or the main issues at the moment, but they never took somewhere a more strategic view on, and what can we learn and how can we use that for our consumption policy making? So how to bring this knowledge that we learned here today into action, and what should we recommend to policymakers and governments?
I could probably take a stab at it and stay brief. I think, you know, Jaco, I'm not optimistic, and I'll tell you why. At the government level, policy and implementation of that policy requires consensus and is by its very nature sticky, meaning that there's a long lag time between the idea, the consensus building, and the translation, assuming that it stays true to the intentions. The market, on the other hand, is, if you look at the housing market in general, supply and demand economics don't really work, because in the US, for example, we have a deficit of 7.5 million affordable homes nationally. And you could say, well, from a supply demand economics point of view, if there is a demand for that much of housing, why is the market not filling it? And the simple answer is because there's no profit in it. So I think that, you know, when you start combining those particular realities, you kind of have to, you're left with just doing triage, you know, emergency measures and other types of actions that are kind of trying to prevent it from getting worse. But I don't have an easy way of imagining how we could accelerate change at the scale at which it's becoming more and more clear we need that change.
Philip, could I come in and comment back on that one? First of all, we're moving into the discussion, which is absolutely right. But I think there are 3 points that are relevant to Jakov asking the question. First of all, where
we are losing you, Valerie. Somehow you're muted. Can anybody else hear?
Connection, so maybe we just move to someone else and wait till she's back, maybe?
Sure. Well, let's give her a second to
put in infrastructure or spaces. Second of all, that also.
Valerie, can you back up a little bit, because we lost you for about 2 minutes.
Okay, there were 3 points I wanted to make. One is where cities put in physical infrastructure like bicycle lanes or turned parking spaces into public people spaces from cars to people, that stayed with us. So that was one. The second one is whether change the provisioning model, exactly like Lei presented to us, like there was a change from mobility on demand to mobility as a service, that stayed and went forward. And the third thing is that what we missed and where we didn't hold it was neighborhood. There was a focus around the home and neighborhoods, and it did not stay with us because there was no neighborhood management. And if we'd have put some kind of neighborhood or community management structure, perhaps within a local authority, perhaps we would have been able to harness the positive changes in the system and not lose them again.
This is very interesting. Does anybody want to comment on this? I know that in China there is a neighborhood management, but it has that's a very special situation that not all of us like particularly. But actually, I forgot to mention that we earlier wrote a book with several of the present speakers, and one chapter was on neighborhoods in China and how they are being managed during the COVID crisis, written by Lei Zhang here, who is here among us. It's very interesting to reread this chapter in this context. I think the bigger question is, what have we learned that we could advise governments to do differently? So far, I think in this session, what we have seen is that we are still struggling with getting relevant data. And we are still in an early phase of country and region comparison and trying to understand those differences. Tomo gave some interesting examples of cultural explanations. There are, of course, also country traditions in government. Janine mentioned the authoritarian streak of governments. So there are all these different, basically we are only starting to scratch the surface to all these complexities. But yes, the big question is, if another crisis hits, and another crisis is hitting us, right? Which at this moment is the high oil and gas prices due to the war, and also food insecurity, also due to the war in Ukraine. How can governments be prepared in such a way that they take the opportunity to transition to a more sustainable infrastructure that promotes sustainable lifestyles? We haven't seen anything of that happening, at least only anecdotally. But what we have seen is some shift to investment in green infrastructure. For instance, in the US, in the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, and also in Europe in some instances, but it's not significant, and I think it needs more research. So does anybody want to comment on this point, Arun?
I can make a couple of observations. One is, if we took a generalized approach and said we want to fix everything, we're clearly not going to be able to digest it in a reasonable time frame, because a lot of the problems we're starting to see crop up are pretty immediate, and a lot of the solutions are fairly delayed, or they need time and resources and organization and all that. So I personally take the tact on two directions. One is, if you take any particular cultural environment or geography, and you ask the question, who are the most vulnerable? Who are the people who are most likely to suffer the most? And you look at sort of specific targeted approaches to soften the blow for them. That gives you a target audience and a target segment of society to say, this is how we can help. And this is where it would make the most difference. The other end of the spectrum is really looking at the higher end of which we've been mostly talking about. And on that end, we could basically say, again, identify very targeted, low intervention, high volume and impact specific strategies to instigate system level change, because I think system level change in every society, as we've heard today, is pretty ingrained. Everyone's got very profound existing conditions, culture and economy and politics that basically constrain us. So I think those might be two particular directions.
Thank you, Erwin. I see two hands up, one from Jaco and one from Janis. And Jaco, I want to ask you, how far can we go beyond the allocated 1.5 hours?
That's a very good question. I don't know by heart what the exact planning is for the next, the follow-up session to start. I have to look that up, but there is a little break in between, and I do not mind that we use the time to
a few more explanations. Okay, go ahead, Jaco.
The next section, which I'll be co-chairing, will start in 10 minutes.
Yeah,
okay.
Good. That's thanks.
Thank you, Thomas.
I just wanted to say Thomas will know that.
Jaco, your comment.
Yeah, so just a few remarks counting on that. So I do agree that there is, well, much more than the previous crisis in 2010. We have got a couple of crises, then at least in Europe, you see much more investments in not only green infrastructure, but also green recovery in a way that's also being enforced or reinforced, stimulated by the Ukraine war. Putting the renewable energy higher on the agenda here. But on the other hand, on the consumption side, you see that the chances have been missed and that we have a real lack in kind of adaptive approach or strategic scenarios that there are much better plans ready when it would happen, or to take better advantage of what has been learned on the sustainability side or can be learned. And just a small point that say, well, we are on average still on the privileged side of in our countries or of the world even, that I had the opportunity to go to Indonesia for collaboration for the first time in a couple of years. But I came across a lot of people that were very seriously struck in the pandemic, that they fully lost their livelihood and their income because they relied on tourism or other kinds of things. And there were, so in some kinds of the worlds, the livelihood impacts of the crisis have been much worse than we have experienced ourselves.
Thank you. Janis?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that at least in Europe, we have seen a lot of government interventions and support, both during the COVID recession, as well as now with the high energy prices. But for COVID, these interventions were mostly to get construction business back in full motion, and also to support some healthcare system investments. And now during the high energy prices, there is a lot of government support for trying to reduce the costs. But again, these interventions are rather regressive, so supporting biggest energy consumers and not really stimulating transition to renewable energies or energy saving or energy efficiencies. But despite of that, at least in Latvia, solar panels, renewables are really booming. So it's not just because of the government and costs, but also I think the full idea of transitioning away from the Russian fossil fuels. So there are multiple effects from these shocks.
Yeah, thank you. And so Janine mentioned that we need to promote local production and supply chains, and I totally agree with that. I'm looking at, I see that the people for the next session are starting to come in, so I would be respectful of people's time and I would like to basically round up this session by giving the floor again to Valerie, because she is the driving force between this this framing of our questions and the collection of our data. Before I give the floor to Valerie, I want to say a few things. First of all, this is a working group that we have renamed from what's the original name? The COVID working group to the first post-COVID, and then we realized there was no post-COVID, so we made it the trans-COVID working group. So those of you who want to join us, I put my email address in the chat box, and you're welcome to join us. We actually have a meeting tomorrow around this time at 9:00 a.m. Eastern time to evaluate this session and also to prepare for the next conference, which is the SCORAI conference from 5 to 8 July next year in Wageningen in the Netherlands. And we intend to have a more elaborate session there with, well, roughly along the same lines, but with more data, more conceptual frameworks, and more policy recommendations. So that is a big challenge for us. So with that, I want to give the floor to Valerie for the last remarks, and then close it off. And also my computer is also running out of electricity, so that's another reason to close this.
Just to say, it is an ongoing discussion. We have not become post-COVID in terms of a discussion. We're ongoing. There are many questions that are still open. We've raised and obviously picked up some of them here. The data is very patchy, and we'll try to follow up and see. But come and join us if you're interested. Whether you're interested because it's COVID, or whether you're interested because how do you harness a crisis, and how do you harness the positive disruptions, embrace positive disruptions. That's what Aaron called it, or whether you're interested in preventing adverse impacts from staying. We obviously didn't find the right way with COVID. It is almost a past issue in most parts of the world now, and other issues have taken over. And a question is perhaps not so much looking at the health or the adverse impacts that happened during the 2 years, but looking at how we can understand and harness a crisis situation in the future and get governments and decision makers and the business world with models, perhaps coming in with better communication systems, perhaps coming in with different kind of apps, with the metaverse, perhaps coming in with a different way of
Valerie, you're oh yeah.
Regressive activities.
Valerie, unfortunately you're breaking out, so
we hope that you will join in the discussion.
Okay, so thank you, and we are sorry to have missed the last minute of your summary, but maybe you will have an opportunity to give it at another point. Certainly in the next year's.
So thank you, Philip.
And I would like to thank all of you, first of all, the members of our own group who did put a lot of work in all these presentations and accepted the limitations of a 5-minute presentation. in SCORAI, we will be able to do much better where everybody will have 15 minutes for a presentation, and we will probably have 2 or 3 sessions on this subject. Second, I want to thank the audience for your questions and for your interest. And again, if you want to work with us, you're welcome. If you want to give your comments in writing afterwards, you're also very welcome to write to us. And I want to thank you. I need to quickly check if there are comments in the chat box that I need to address. There is a long one from Maria Santos. Yeah. Okay, we have to.
Very sorry, but
yeah.
we have to wrap it up for the next session. Sorry for that.
Thank you all. Yeah. Thank you, Valerie.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jaco, for hosting us. And thank you, KAN SSCP. Great to see you, and bye-bye, everybody.
Yeah, thank you all so much. I would like to thank the organizers of the session and all the speakers and all the discussants, but we have to leave it here at this moment so that there are a few minutes to prepare for the next session.
Right.
But thank you so much, and please stay also for the closing plenary and evaluation after the next session. But it was really great to see you back and have this discussion and having seen this presentation. Thank you so much. But we have to leave it here.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Philip. Bye.
So welcome, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you may be. My name is Jaco Quist. I'm affiliated with Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands. So for me, it's the afternoon. I'm acting here as the host for the conference committee of the conference on transforming towards sustainable consumption and production from knowledge to action. That is organized on behalf of the Future Earth Knowledge Action Network on systems of sustainable consumption and production. I do not want to say much more than that we will have a workshop session on local action towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, and that's organized, as proposed and submitted by colleagues working on the local sustainability action platform. That's all what I would like to leave it, what I would like to say, and I would like to leave it here. And I would like to hand it over to the session share and facilitator, Emmanuelle Vita.
Thank you, Jaco. You said good morning for me and good evening, good afternoon. This session is called the localization of the SDG, designing digital tools to match the needs of local change makers. And it looks like from the registration list that we have, there's many change makers from across the globe who are joining us today. We have a pretty ambitious agenda, so I would like to start now to tell you a little bit more about what we plan on doing. We have a couple of roundtable planned for today, we will, during which you will have the opportunity to share your work as a change maker and local actor. And we will also share our approach as a sustainability action platform. It is an honor to be here today on behalf of the team, the SAP team, and to facilitate this workshop with Professor Thomas Reuter. As Jaco said, my name is Emmanuelle. I work across multiple sectors, including water conservation, landscape restoration, regenerative agriculture, and urban planning, community engagement, also through the arts, both as an independent consultant, researcher, and adjunct professor here in the US and globally. Our goal for this workshop today is to share your experience towards working towards the SDGs and with various sectors of sustainable consumption and production and across sectors, as a researcher and local actor, and particularly using a digital platform to support sustainable initiative. We hope that you can learn from each other, and also we hope that the team, the SAP team, also can gain insights on how a digital platform can improve knowledge sharing to support local actors, while also informing research and facilitate collaboration to reach the SDGs. Just trying to go down here. Oh, sorry. So SAP is a formally recognized initiative within Futures as well, under the auspice of the system of sustainable consumption and production and the Global Research Network. We are proposing to develop a digital platform that connects projects and networks and digital tools to be utilized by other platforms through open access. Our goal is to co-design together with stakeholders innovative digital tools that improve functionality of sustainable platform. To this session, we hope to inspire interest in joining our co-design efforts and help us build a platform and tools that truly serve the needs of local actors by sharing solutions, as well as allowing researchers to connect and engage with local actors. After Professor Reuter provides an overview of the SAP approach, we plan on having an interactive session today divided in 3 parts. First, we will randomly create a roundtable of a few participants, maybe 3 to 5 participants, where you will take turns sharing your work and experience with digital platforms for about 15 minutes. And afterwards, we will move to a larger table to discuss in more depth digital platforms and tools that are or might be useful to local actors and researchers. And we'll do that again for about 15 minutes. And a rapporteur from each group, if we have large enough group, will share the insights with the larger group. And we also try to make time for Q&A. So here, the team group, we are a group of practitioners, academics, and researchers from multiple disciplines and sectors with expertise across the spectrum of sustainability transition governance. My colleagues are not able to join us today, apart from Thomas, but we have a few other team members, I think, who may be joining us today. Professor Isna Wang, and with the National Sun Yat-sen University, and Professor Walter Su at the Taipei Medical Center, as well as Professor Benno Werlen from the University of Jena in Germany. I believe we might also have a few members of partner organizations with us today, including ICLI, the Global Network of Local Government for Sustainability. We have also partnered with other global nonprofit organizations, including ECOLIS, the Global Sustainable Futures Progress to Partnership Network, the World Academy of Art and Science, and a growing number of international and national NGOs, as well as academic and research organizations. So before I pass the screen to Professor Reuter, I would like to share just a quick practicalities. As you know, the session is recorded, so please keep your camera off if you don't want to be on the screen. But during the small group conversation, I would encourage you to turn on the camera if you can, and keep your microphone muted while you're not speaking. If you have any comment, questions, or ideas, feel free to share them in the chat throughout the session. We also at the end invite you to fill out a Google survey, and that's where you will be able to share further insights. So, and towards at the end of the session, when we collect the recording and the survey, we will create a collective narrative from the conversations, and we will share those with those who indicated interest in being involved in thematic groups. Without further ado, I will now pass the screen to Professor Thomas Reuter.
Okay, thank you, Emmanuelle. Now, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the SAP project. Now, our overarching goal is to help local actors in their efforts to implement and thus to localize the SDGs. So the SDGs are our model for systemic change, and with all their complex synergies and trade-offs, as you know, are aware. But the SDG model, in our view, needs to be adapted to local realities, which differ in different parts of the world. And we need to move from targets to solutions, from demands on local people, local actors, to actually helping them. So in order to achieve this, SAP seeks to support local actors and their general sort of a general transition to sustainability from below, because we also feel that a change from above, we've had decades of people talking about that, and it's just not happened. And we put our bet on change from below. So to this end, we will help the local actors exchange solutions with their own peers across sectors, business, government, and community, and as well as also directly connecting with engaged scientists who are interested in making their science count at the local level. And scientists don't usually engage at the local level. It's a real gap we want to close. And this kind of digital service we find does not exist yet, not in a genuinely usable and comprehensive form that we would like to see. Next slide, please. Now, in order to plan for this project, we did a review of existing sustainability platforms, and we've also published that review. And we discovered that many of these platforms have serious weaknesses and biases. So although, of course, they also have useful features, one of the biases is that most of them tend to be oriented towards serving the global north rather than the global south, where that kind of help is most needed. And there's also the fact that most of these platforms tend to tell local actors what to do rather than actually asking them what solutions they have found. We're on the next slide, thanks. So it's kind of top down. It doesn't really take serious the knowledge that local actors have. We're on the previous slide stick. I'll let you know when we change.
Okay, sorry.
The previous slide, please. So we want to help tap into the knowledge that local actors have, and that's solution oriented. Okay, and the other thing we found is low interoperability between platforms. They don't collaborate. They all act in silos. The data doesn't flow between them. And we want to create a platform that has open access tools, that is highly interoperable, so that the resources from different existing digital infrastructure can be pooled. And the other thing we found is that co-design is very vital to if you want to create a usable and inclusive platform, and it doesn't usually happen. And the other thing is algorithms, having algorithms that really help provide individual users with exactly the kind of information they need. That I already mentioned, so Web3, the whole decentralization idea, so that we actually get an idea also through this of what local actors do rather than what they should be doing. So it's more of an empirical approach. Next slide, please. Okay, now the what we would like to accomplish is, first of all, to weave a cross-sector community of practice globally that is able to collaborate and engage in local transitions to sustainability. We want to combine different sources of knowledge, different ways of knowing. We want to showcase and promote innovative solutions, both from researchers and from local actors on the ground. We want to encourage and facilitate open dialogue across sectors, and empower those actors, especially in the global south. And we want to create a database that will allow research on transitions as they happen. And that means That's different from a prescriptive way of looking at sustainability. It's more an empirical approach. So there's lots of research opportunities too from the database. And yes, and of course we will have been, Emmanuelle has mentioned that we've been building a network of partners, and we will continue to extend that, both in the academic realm and also with local actor networks. Okay, next slide, please.
All right.
Yes, okay. So, as I said, SAP is all about moving from research to action. So while we're very much about science engagement, we also want to involve local actors right from the beginning in the co-design of the platform. So that we have basically 3 streams: science participants, that includes perhaps many of you if you're interested, and also local partners and their representatives, and then technology. We will have we have a budget for a fairly large budget for IT services. So we'll have IT experts accompanying this whole process and keeping us informed on what is feasible and also on what perhaps does not work. So technically, so it's a genuine co-design process, at the end of which we will then have an operational platform. Next slide, please. The finished platform will look something like this. So you'll have users arriving on the platform. They will establish an account, and then they will use a self-assessment tool to describe everything they're doing for sustainability, following a kind of a survey questionnaire, an assessment tool. Yeah? And that will identify, first of all, positive solutions that they've discovered, which can be shared with others who use the platform. It will also identify their weaknesses and areas where they can improve. And then an algorithm will allocate solutions from other peers to suit the individual user and their needs, to address those areas of overall systemic change where they are weak, those SDGs where they haven't really progressed as much. So it's a kind of a give and take. So there's there will be an assessment report, targeted solutions for their specific needs. We'll also have a registry of consultants for those local actors who want expert advice, and a case study library, and access to scientific knowledge, which we will feed in from other websites. So what that means is that the users, the end users, the local actors, they will gain access to a wide range of knowledge also beyond peer exchange. And while we will have an algorithm to help them find material that is very relevant to them, they can also browse the database. Then, as you can see, there's also the possibility for meta-analysis, because once we have a lot of users deposit their information on the platform, we can analyze that information and get an idea of how local sustainability efforts are progressing, where they are succeeding, or where they are delayed. So yeah, I think that's probably enough for now. Okay, I think that's probably enough to get an overview.
Sure.
Thank you, and back to you, Emmanuelle.
All right, thank you, Thomas. Yeah, that was a good overview. Sorry, I just have to click on it. Okay, so I'd like to proceed to our roundtable, even so our roundtable may be a little bit smaller. I think we have now 11 participants, I think including technical people. So maybe we can divide it in 2 or 3 groups and include Thomas or Benno in one of the group. And I just like invite you just to have this conversation and speak to the gaps that you see between practitioners, stakeholders, local change maker and policymaker. In understanding, as Thomas said, sharing and information and taking collaborative action towards the SDGs. And also just if you share your experience as a scientist and local actor, how do you use digital platform to share knowledge? And if you have time, what features you use in doing so? So Yen or Charles, if you want to divide us in 2 groups, 2 or 3 groups of 3, if you don't want to be including in the group, maybe just 2 groups, that would be great.
Okay.
And I can also share, I'm sorry. If you want to copy in the chat, I can, if you divide it in the groups, I'm sorry. I can also post the question in the chat. So when you divide it in a smaller group, it also appears. So here.
Okay, thank you, Emmanuelle. Yep, you can see
The group
that.
has been done. Should we rename it to the one in your chat box, or just group 1 or group 2?
Group 1 and group 2, I think, should be fine.
Okay. Now the attendee here can select the group you want to join, and please be sure that each group have 1 co-host. I will remind you about the time for when there's only last 4 minutes. Each discussion group time limit will be 15 minutes. So now you can join the group. Thank you.
Okay.
So Thomas, you stay.
Yeah, I'm not part of the group by the looks of it.
Okay, we can't see. I think Benno is still with us. If Benno wants to be in a group to maybe make sure
I think
that
we should all be. Why shouldn't we be in the groups?
Yeah, I think we should just maybe be in the group as well. Originally, I think I will be in the group. Charles?
Charles,
Oh,
I
yeah, is that you?
Yeah, I have to live in the main host here to check the timer here.
Yep, yeah, and I think originally I was going to stay in the main room because, you know, with 100 people, there's always some issues.
I mean, because the people only have 10, so I just apply it like a divide into 2 and 2.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. So I just wondered if I should remain in the room. That's okay. I can remain in the room and have just wait after. I didn't know exactly how you proceed. And then I just
I just see the number to check.
Yeah, the 4 minutes and 2 minutes sometime either to show or to be back everyone. So Thanks,
Hello
Ian.
there.
Should, I guess I'm close.
Okay, we're all back, I think.
Okay, great. I hope you enjoy your conversations. I think we're going to do things a little bit differently for the second roundtable. Since you're a small group, we're going to have a conversation as an entire group. So this is what we intended for you. Oh, sorry, it's just for to discuss in the round 2 is to share their perspective from the 2 different groups, and then go a little deeper in the conversation and speak to, in quotes, what would the ideal sustainability action platform look like, and what particular features it would have. So we had planned to actually use a Jamboard, and I think it may be still interesting to do that unless someone doesn't want to. I can give you a brief demonstration on how to do it, and I thought for this matter, it may be just interesting just to write, speaking to the gaps that you see and you shared in a previous conversation, we may be able to just write little sticky notes, and then all you just write is what the highlights of the conversation that you had, and then we'll have a board where we actually kind of have a little summary of your previous conversations. So I would invite you to do that, and then continue a little bit, a little more with the conversation. But I'd like to give you just a short 2-minute breaks before maybe we do a round of brief introductions, since we have time for that. If you want to run to the restroom, grab coffee or anything, maybe just a couple of minutes.
Now it's back to recording.
Okay, good.
Okay, everyone is back? I think so. Perfect. Yeah. So I posted the Jamboard link in the chat. So if you want to click on it, then you also are able to, perfect. So you can social media, and then if you want to, you can move it anywhere you want onto the board. So again, here the sticky note is probably the easiest tool to use. You click on it, you can pick a color, and you can write anything. And I would invite you to write, just either the features or the gaps that you discussed earlier in the previous conversation. So maybe we'll take a minute or 2 to do that. Mm-hmm. And then, since we are a small group, we can go to a short round of introduction before we discuss the ideal digital sustainability action platform, what it would like. Or if you want to tell me, if you don't have access to the Jamboard, any gaps that you identified together as a group, or that you heard someone speaking of, mm-hmm. I'm happy to post it as well. So let's see, social media, maybe as a tool. Oh, great. So I see a couple there coming. Local actors are time poor. Yes. Time and resources poor, often. So here we can with them so we can see. Great. Can someone maybe, as we post the SCAP or those insights, speak to, for example, simulating solution? What did your group discuss in? And maybe what do you mean by simulating solutions as a tool? And if you want to speak to that, maybe you can also share just a brief introduction of who you are, what is your work and interests.
Yeah, that was me who added that. I'm Amy Jones from ICLE, ICLE World Secretariat based in Bonn. So when I put simulating solutions, it was more kind of linking to the fact that local actors, subnational governments may be kind of confined by their resources that they have access to. So I think it's useful if on a platform there is an option to simulate what would happen if different solutions were implemented. I think it helps with the decision-making process if local actors can kind of get data on what the changes would be, what the impacts would be if they were to implement a certain initiative or solution.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else wants to speak to their sticky note?
Yes, I can. I think Robert was mentioning who works with small and medium enterprises, network in Austria. Robert Kremitzer, who's one of our partners, Klimaverbund, he mentioned that social media is very important. It's very hard to get people to submit data and to keep submitting it and updating it, because first of all, there are already other players in the field who are impinging on their time and asking them to submit data. For example, the World Bank. But social media is a different matter. That's much more pleasurable and more, it's easier to get people to get involved in that.
Mm-hmm. Great. I see someone is still on the failure experiences. Anyone wants to speak to that?
It was me. Hi, Robert. I posted it. We learn more about, often we learn more about the failure cases than about the success stories. And I think it's really interesting also to see, because you don't have to follow the same paths if you know that they don't work. So
great.
From the beginning, also we start with not only with success stories, but also with those stories that didn't work out.
Great. Robert, do you mind telling us, just giving us a brief introduction of where you're at and what is your sector?
I'm situated close to Vienna, so Austria, and we have a platform for sustainability SMEs, which means smaller companies which want to develop towards sustainability and don't know how. That's the main point at the moment. The smaller companies are not affected by the regulations, but they are not directly affected, but indirectly they are a lot. And more to come, and there's almost no information around. So it needs information, and it needs to help them to prepare on one side, and on the other side, we are talking about new products, new business cases, new businesses to come with a new decarbonized world coming. So it's a lot of entrepreneurial stuff also, where you can develop new products and new services.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're working on with SMEs.
Okay, great, thank you. So I see the stick is a digital SAP could be a great support both locally and translocally. Maybe that kind of transition us to the next question. What would be an ideal digital sustainable action? So how could SAP be a great support, do you think, both to locally and translocally?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I wanted specifically to ask Amy to say a little bit about her work at ICLEI, because we just heard from Robert, who works with businesses, and of course ICLEI, we're talking governments there. And Amy, if I understood you correctly, you are the digital officer for ICLEI. So how far have you sort of progressed with digital tools within ICLEI?
Well, I'm a junior research officer, so that does kind of cover the research and innovation projects for And so we're working at the moment on the Rethink Action project. So that's a cross-sectoral planning decision-making platform to try and inspire climate action. So there are 2 layers to the platform. One is for citizens, anybody who's interested. And then the other layer is for local government representatives, city decision makers. So we're working, the platform has a focus on land adaptation and mitigation solutions. So that's the central focus. And at the moment we're focusing on 6 key areas in Europe, but we're aiming to scale up by the end of the project and be able to apply the platform to areas globally. So we're 1 year in at the moment. The platform hasn't been finished because part of the project is implementing a co-creation aspect. So we're involving people, the end user community, in shaping the platform as much as is viable. So yeah, it's a 4-year project. So we're 1 year in.
Yeah, that's very interesting, Amy. Thank you. We should probably see how we can combine that or work in with you and learn from what you've done already. Because the problem is that so many people trying to do some, digital coming up with some digital innovations, and there's too little cooperation. That's one of the major problems.
Yeah, I'll share the link to our website.
Oh, excellent. Yeah.
Interested to learn a bit more. Yeah, that's in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
So I see we have more comments, and so maybe if we go, we're still speaking a little bit to the gap and the challenges that Sustainability Action Platform kind of bring up as you speak to Amy, to scaling up, going from national to global, and other challenges. How do you think that could be overcome, and what features particularly do you think a platform will allow for more collaboration and also scaling?
I think knowledge exchange is important. Also, I suppose, I think it's important if a local government are implementing solutions that maybe the local communities feel they have a say, and also some level of ownership over it to then engage. So I think if these platforms are really interactive, and if people feel they're being listened to, I think that's very important. And I guess that's sort of the foundation maybe for scaling up. If people are using it because they feel listened to, then I think that's something that's applicable all over the world. So yeah, I suppose that would be a good foundation to begin with, perhaps.
Mm.
Great.
Yeah.
Does anyone want to speak to also what Amy said in terms of features and that platforms can offer to bring more interaction between local actors?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think this is the basic idea of such a platform would be
exactly
to bring them into interaction and to find partners, because a company, especially the SMEs, they start with a challenge, with a problem they are facing, and they need fast solutions. That's also why usually they start around within their network. They're starting to ask questions within the network. Then there are organizations like in Austria, Wirtschaftskammer. They start to ask questions there about any solutions, and of course they are they like any help about or like any information about some other company facing the same challenges and maybe having them solved. But also, from my experience, SMEs are very on the edge of technology, and they are very much interested in the latest research. Maybe not in the way it is communicated, because it often is hidden in very difficult written papers. But the possibility to have the latest research on some solution-based technology would be very interesting also. But we never have to forget that they, in their mind, in the mind of local actors, there is the problem, the challenge, and that's where we have to meet them. So usually if you find a database full of solutions, it doesn't work because people don't find the interlink between the challenge and the solution. So at the moment, the problem is high energy costs. And if you have a database full of possible energy production solutions, you don't see the linkage. You have to, a platform has to start with a challenge. So if you have high energy costs, I bring you possible solutions, possible partners, possible international, possible ways it is done in other regions in the world, possible research projects, whatever, but always starting with the problem we have.
So the challenges and the solution we speak to.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's very important to link that up. You know, the needs and the solutions. You know, you have to establish first the needs.
And you mentioned, Robert, the kind of the latest technology solution as a motivator as well to bring in partners. And
so it is. I experienced the last 15 years. There is no. If you have any topic, it's really difficult to find out which university, which institute, which person, which professor, whoever, actually is dealing with exactly this problem you're facing. There's no you would say like a Wikipedia where you just enter like, I don't know, hydropower, and you would see there are those 15 universities in the world of top research in new hydropower technologies.
And and that's exactly what Thomas mentioned earlier as the database, the resource. That's what SAP is hoping to also accomplish.
I think one of the main advantages of such a platform is the shortcut. It has to be a shortcut to information.
Shortcut. So
that's when I use it. So if I know, okay, I can Google it. I can Google it all, but I know it takes hours or hours. But on a platform like this, I would have a direct link to exactly the person I need, the organization I need, the information I need. It has to be a shortcut.
Great. So maybe we can all look at our different stickies a little bit together and see if there's anything else you would like to share or comment on. And then I would like to also share the survey that we have prepared for you if you have other thoughts that come.
Well, I would at least like to add or contribute something to the ongoing discussion.
Great.
And I fully agree that options must be found, and then they're really nice if they have a shortcut. But of course, what would be really as relevant for such a platform, even it's a digital platform, that it can facilitate something like a learning community. So, say just searching and finding your information is one thing, as some people are really good at that, but most people learn more from the social interaction or the discussion, even at different kinds of levels of complexity. So in the Netherlands, we had something like environmental action program, and say, or environmental learning program, and it was based on that the main thing was not so much the database, or at that time it was not yet a database, but it was a manual. It was a book, or it was a course thing. But the main thing, the main driver, and also that it got embedded, is that you could only do it if you were together with people as a group. And as a group, you went through the process of analyzing your own consumer behavior and how you could change that. And that's say, in that way, this program became a learning tool. It was like, now we call that a learning community. You can also make that online, but you want to have this action platform not only to provide the information, but to facilitate the learning of people and through the interaction and the collaboration, not only for the businesses, but that's especially important it's actually important for any actor, that if you learn together, you learn more, and it gets better embedded in you as a person.
Exactly, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Jaco, because we haven't spoken too much yet, but we have it a little bit in the survey of the thematic groups that we are in the process of creating as we speak now to help develop those tools. So what we hope to achieve through the thematic group is learning from each other again, kind of doing what we're doing today, but going a little deeper into designing and trying to create specific tools. So in the survey that we'll share, we ask if there's any special theme that you would like to propose for SAP to create a group to go a little deeper into the needs of this specific group. And if you have any suggestions now also to share, if you may be interested in working on a specific theme, and creating a group that we will also help facilitate and develop, help co-create the tools that we spoke of. So I don't know if you went that far in the previous conversation, but that is something that we would love to inspire you to do from this session today. And you'll have also the opportunity to share some insight and feedback to the survey that we will share in a minute. But is anyone has any specific insights or interest that would like to share in maybe forming a group, or we have several themes, including policy, humanities, and of course a technical group that we already have started to form within the ASAP team. But we're hoping to bring more individual and expert and people interested in our group, as well as forming maybe additional groups. So maybe what I can do now is share the link to this survey that we prepared. Again, we thought we were going maybe to have a very large group and people may not have had the time to speak and share their ideas. So we prepared this survey for you to use in, if you want to go a little deeper into answering those questions that we discussed, and also propose some ideas for the thematic groups. So I will share the form, and maybe we can go, what do you think, Thomas, should we look at the survey briefly together, or leave it for people to look at it?
I think we should definitely share the link. I think have you already done that?
Yeah, I just put it in the, and what I know that, local actors are time poor, researchers are time poor, everyone is time poor. So what we suggested is just to fill out the survey if you would like to share more and want to participate maybe in a thematic group that will be developing those digital tools. And we'd love for you to do that within the next few hours. I think I was planning on keeping the survey open for the next 5 hours. And then with your emails also, we would like to share and invite you to join some groups, and we also going to put a little narrative together of our conversation today, and we'd be happy to share that with you as well, if you're interested in pursuing those conversations. Oh, Jacko, I can't hear you. You're muted.
Okay.
Would you like to unmute? Yeah, perfect.
I'll unmute him.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Jacko, can you see the notification? I have sent a notification of unmuted. Okay.
And please, in the survey, feel free to share some feedback, critiques on this session, or anything that the SATS approach, and any input will be valuable to us. And Jacko,
I have sent a notification to him to let him know he is muted and he can unmute now, but manually I don't think I can unmute for.
yeah, I ask as well.
Okay.
That's all I can do as well on my end.
Yeah, because that has to depend on the attendance by site.
Oh, I see.
Because we don't know it's muted by Zoom or muted by his microphone. Okay, now he's unmuted.
Okay.
I'm very sorry, but I was I got a short call that I had to answer.
Oh,
okay.
And I hope that you didn't hear me because I thought I was muted.
Oh.
No, we didn't. We were worried that you were trying to speak to us.
No. Okay, I should also have to switch my video. Let me take that as a lesson to next time. So I think we had a really good session, and I'm looking actually quickly to the timeline that we were doing. And we are, I look, we have, there's still another 20 minutes.
Yes, and I was speaking, Jacko, to this survey that Thomas and I created because, again, we thought people may not have had the time to share the insights and input. So I put the link in the chat. Make sure
would you like to bring up the slide for the survey?
There we go.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
There we go. So this is what the survey looks like. I believe that we have your email by nature of this conference also. We were sharing emails. And if you have your interest, we just, ask to share any insight that you were not able to share during the workshop. And then everything, of course, is optional. And the survey is optional, the questions are optional. And then we kind of reiterate some of the questions if you want to add anything that you haven't added. And then also we asking you if you would like to join a thematic co-design group that will be working on designing the different digital tools. And then any feedback on the SATS approach, and like I said, critiques on the session and presentations, any input will be valuable to us. So feel free to do so. If you can within the next hours, it would be fantastic. Don't want you to have to think about it tomorrow anyway and add it to your list. So, and then we will provide a brief collective narrative, and then I will also try to include some of the comments and wording that you included in the Jamboard. And we will share that with those who express interest in pursuing the conversation with us and maybe joining groups. So thank you so much for joining this session. Thank you to SSCP for inviting us to present a SAP. And thank you to the Yen and Charles for the technical support. I hope you enjoyed the session.
Yeah, just one thing, Emmanuelle, that we should mention is that this project is currently under consideration in stage 2 for a funding from the Development Forum. We'll probably find out around the end of this year. And if you receive funding, you will be hearing a lot more from us, and we'll have also more time to devote to mobilizing community around this platform, and of course the technical expertise with us. So I hope we will be really starting in earnest at the beginning of next year.
Yes, thank you, Thomas. Yeah, and facilitating more learning communities to develop those tools and the platform as well. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Benno, for joining.
Thank you.
Yeah. So is this the, sorry, I missed a little bit, but this is also the moment that you would like to wrap it up, or is there something you would like to use more of the time available for you for this session?
You know, I think we decided to wrap it up, unless Thomas, you have something else you'd like to mention?
No, I think we can wrap up here, because we don't have so many participants who outside the team, so really it's not necessary.
Okay, then I will also say something on that, but I also would like to draw a few links between other things I have heard here today and what I've also now seen in this one. And so this sustainability action platform that has a very considerable potential, or strong potential in different settings, especially if you can connect that to learning communities, so that people really learn and put that into action. But there is more to gain from than actually the kind of discussion that we had, because in the previous session we had well, a heated discussion that actually what we've seen in the COVID, the changes of the lifestyles during the pandemic. Well, we were enforced to live much more local and much more sustainable, and we see that it's really changing or getting back to the original state. Or in some countries even they indicated that the environmental impact is growing rather than decreasing due to the getting to normal or actually expanding consumption. But say one of the problems that so what is learned, or what is possible, what can be learned from the COVID policies and the pandemic lockdowns, is that on the one hand, governments do not take the opportunity, and so they would like to have strategic plans. Actually, they need like a platform or something like a SAP to base on that. That would be a really nice application for that. And the second thing I noticed, so I just was quickly looking in the Refank website, and there you see similar ambition. So that's also an example that the right knowledge is being developed, and say these different initiatives and issues can benefit from each other if that we would get more discussion and more exchange. But it's also shows so clearly that say the action is so much needed. So putting the knowledge that we're having into action is urgently needed, and that's exactly one of the topics that this sustainability action platform could provide.
Great. I'm glad to hear that, Jaco.
Yeah. So there is
all those efforts together. And
so there's much potential beyond the social media and the digitalization. Of course, that are the favorite features of the platform economy. We also see that in the internet ordering and the renting and exchange platforms, but also here that would be really great if such a thing could provide a backbone not only for support for local actors, but also at the higher levels for more strategic thinking for situations that may happen where you may need like options so that you can be more than responses, but that you can actually be get a kind of an adaptive policy or adaptive policy making or adaptive management in order to solve or address the challenges ahead of us.
Mm-hmm.
So not only about what to do now, but also what we need from this or can use for the challenges that will come ahead of us.
Yes. That's a very good consideration also for a policy theme group. We'll make sure to share that in the collective narrative.
Yeah, and I think there must be interest also from the post-COVID or trans-COVID lifestyles group to think about, because they're really facing or colliding with the issue. Well, we have the knowledge, but we are not, or the right actors are not learning from it in a way that they are prepared for the future, or in a way that they can use it for making consumption and production more sustainable. So achieving or moving towards SDG 12.
So maybe we can continue to connect with some of the SSCP subgroups, like the lifestyle, the policy group as well, correct? You have working groups already around those themes.
Yes, yeah, well, Thomas is familiar with them, so
yeah.
I don't explain that. Yes, of course, we have working groups on political economy, we have working groups on behavior, we have working groups on communication, and this lifestyle groups is actually a kind of a spin-off of the sustainable consumption cities that is a bit dormant at the moment.
Or maybe we need to reconnect.
Yeah, and maybe that's something to bring in the next steering committee meeting, Thomas.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, we should think about how we can coordinate between the working groups, because I think they're all, like you said, looking for a practical outlet where sort of the tire of knowledge can hit the road, you know, and where we can actually really have impact. And like Robert said before, you know, often it's very hard for actors, local actors in business or other sectors to get access to the cutting edge research. So the frustration is on both sides.
Yeah, so in that way, let's say we have the discussion that we're too much on the knowledge side, what you get when you are mainly populated by academics, although some are a bit on the action side or activists, but we still would like to see more development there so that the knowledge is really utilized, and this has a lot of potential for that. And if this can bring that further, that alone would already be a great achievement, apart from all the knowledge and personal gains that we have got. And I see that Stephen has also joined. Not sure whether he's already able to switch his video on.
Hello,
but
hello.
As one of the chairs of the steering committee of the KAN, you may say something about this as well.
Yeah, I'm just logging on now, and I wasn't able to see the last session, unfortunately, to teach. But I think in terms of connecting this initiative, you know, it's been part of the KAN, and it's been brewing. Thomas has been sort of, you know, making this more and more of a kind of a really solid initiative as part of the KAN, that there would be more ways in which other working groups could help and support, because this idea of local needs, you know, and actions at the local scale, it's relevant for all of these different working groups and a lot of the research that they're interested in. So sort of you know, thinking about deepening the methodology in which to engage in sustainable consumption production research with different themes, you know. So I think that's quite, there's a lot of potential there for sure. And hopefully, I mean, crossing our fingers about the Belmont Forum and the funding and all this. Yeah, that would be really
I
nice.
agree, Stephen, because also we were saying earlier that on the platform there's much room for content, you know, to inspire a learning community. You need to have content, you have to have events. I kind of don't see why the different working groups within the Knowledge Action Network can't hold events on their topics, insofar they are at all relevant to local actors, and I think most of them are. So I think there's real scope there to use the platform in a fairly broad way. Yeah, as a community.
Yeah, definitely. I agree completely. That was part of this conference, is sort of an outgrowth of that discussion in the steering committee about doing more. And of course, it would be great. I think what's nice about the CAN as it is, the working groups do have a lot of freedom to do what they like, if they have the capacity to do so, you know. But I think, yeah, there's a lot. What's really nice is, for example, in the conference here, we've got nice support from the Future Earth office in Taiwan, and of course in Kyoto, and they're always willing to sort of support with the logistical stuff. But it's, yeah, it would be great if there would be more activities and more events coming from the different working groups, certainly. Yeah.
Actually, I'm not sure that you're aware, but we also have a strong Taiwan connection. Part of our team is based in Taiwan, so part of the applications also through MOS. And unfortunately, they have not been able to join us. It's difficult with the time difference, but I also must say the fact that this conference coincided with a COP is a problem. Several of our team members are there, and I think a lot of other people too in the wider sustainability community. So that was a bit unfortunate. Yeah,
that's true. That's true. I don't think that was on the larger radar at all for us. Yeah, that's too bad. Yeah, well, and it's something to think about, especially when we're talking about future conferences like this one in maybe 2 years or something like this. If we think about that, I think that's on the horizon for sure. But that's good. Taiwan is, there's some of us from the Taiwan team, I think they're on the call, but yeah, it is late for them now.
Yes.
I see Charles on and Daiji. Right.
But thank you very much for the opportunity to present and discuss SAP with everyone. Really hope to collaborate a little bit more and deepen our conversations together, work within the working group and the thematic groups that we are developing at SAP as well. But please send us any suggestions or any ideas that you may have to better collaborate as well as we move on, hopefully with our Belmont.
Yeah, thank you very much. As a few final words, because now we're close to 4:10. So as the host on behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to thank the organizers and the participants of this session. And I especially like the closing discussion, how to link the platform, the SAP initiative, to say the more knowledge-oriented other working groups, or whether we can find for a synergy. So that would be a nice outcome if we could bring that further. So I would like to thank you all. I really enjoyed the discussion, the session over here. It's a real pity that from the 100 registered persons for this session, only 11 in the end attended, but the ones that were here, I really enjoyed the discussion with them. And this is also where I would like to leave it for today, for this session. The only thing, and so I would suggest that for a moment that we pause the recording. that everyone who is interested to take a break or stretch a leg for a couple of minutes, that we just wait for that, and that we do just the final plenary and wrap up of the entire online conference. And my kind invitation to everyone still here is to stay for the final discussion about the entire conference.
Great.
Thank you, Jaco. And Stephen, thank you very much. Stephen, I wanted to share with you the little survey that we also invited participants to fill out if they wanted to share more insights.
Great. Yeah, I see the link. Perfect. Thank you very much.
So maybe it's possible that it will be sent out with a little explanation. If you can send it actually to us by email with a little explanation, then I think we can organize that all participants will get it.
And in fact, it would be great if you could send it out to the 110 who enrolled for the
so
session.
Everyone to register, if you just add to the link in an email a little bit of explanation, just a few sentences that the ones that are not familiar with the SAP that they also can contribute, and I think that may give you additional inputs. That would be great, I think.
Yeah, I think we might have to just redesign it a little bit, because the purpose was for, people who had not had the opportunity to share insights during the conversations that we had. So I think
it's our offer. Yeah. The important thing is that it works better if it could be sent out tomorrow.
That sounds good. I think we will take you up on that, Jack, or maybe just change it or use it as it is. But thank you.
Yeah.
I have to leave. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Yeah, great. Great. So welcome for the very finally wrap-up plenary of the online conference from the KAN on Sustainable Consumption and Production, with a focus on with a team on from knowledge to action. We've had 8 sessions of online meetings with presentations and discussions in about 10 days, in the last 10 days. And I'm really glad to see that still a few people are here for the final wrap-up. And my main question, or my first question, as far as you have been able to attend, so what did you like about the online conference or the session that you have been in? And you can unmute and say, but you're also very welcome to write it down in the chat, as long as we are able to codify it.
I can start. And I was able to join at least 3 of the days. And I think one thing I really liked was the diversity. Of course, in each session, the working groups really kind of put together nice programs, diverse talks, with a variety of topics, because it just sort of shows and I guess showcases the diversity of interests around sustainable consumption and production in the KAN. The keynote kind of kicked us off and moved us in a nice direction, thinking about the future of consumption and work, because I think work is something that connects to a lot of different sessions and the themes that are discussed in those. And I remember nicely the session on circular economy and biodiversity, and looking at how we can find biodiversity in these circular models and ensure that it's being respected and sort of cared for. And then I was on a day looking at a lot of work on futures, which is of course interesting for me in my background. I really enjoyed those sessions, and the paper sessions on with a bit more diverse perspective on consumption in the future beyond consumption. Yeah. So the diversity was really nice, in my opinion.
Great, thank you for saying all that. I tried to make a few notes, so if I'm not so quick, that's because I'm also typing. But we're also recording it, so we can take a listen at it. So well, see, there are not so many left, but also for you, Emmanuelle or Thomas, what did you like from the online conference as far as you've been able to join it?
So I was not able to join. However, I watched the videos and I really appreciated that you posted the videos shortly after.
Okay.
So yeah,
that's a good point. We see that there are sometimes fewer people on the session than we expect them, but it can be that they register to get access to the video so that they can watch it afterwards at the time that is more convenient in their time zone or in their personal life.
but you also send the emails with the the latest video right away, and that was helpful. So and I have a question on that note. So you will do so for today as well, in the next few days to be able. Yes.
Yes.
All the session will be posted in the YouTube once we edit to make sure that each break time doesn't influence the whole session timeline.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah,
I just wanted to.
So of course, in Asia we're now running. Oh no, it's still 1 day to go. So that's a good planning. So it may even work tomorrow in the working day time, I hope.
I was wondering about the design of the conference. Of course, you split the sessions over 5 days, which has some distinct advantages for people. It's not as tiring. You don't have to put away a whole day for it. And you can also order the session times to suit different time zones better. The problem is, though, that it's hard to get everybody to join the session that they want. It could be very late for some people, especially in Asia. I think most of the sessions were pretty reasonable for Europeans, but also for the Americans, not always easy. But it's hard to solve these issues. What is your sort of take on the overall design?
Great, thanks for mentioning that, Thomas. Yes, both are a good point, but of course still a difficult point.
Yeah, the thoughts around the designing was to try to spread out, the times in, of course, the right time zones where the most people, of course, those that were presenting had to be considered, right? So that was part of the reason that one day, for example, was split up. We just could not manage, but we tried to make it at least possible for folks around the world to experience as much as possible. Of course, within that, then one place becomes the winning site, and I think that's Europe in this case, right? Because it became possible to join most of the sessions, I think all the sessions at a fairly reasonable hour, but for Asia, it got quite late. Yeah.
Yeah, we actually tried to design every time for 2 time zones. So we had actually Asian European time slots that were in the morning slots, and we had actually Europe America time slots. So that meant that Europe was then both on the lucky side. Let me put it that way. But there was not so much way to change that, or unless we could do something like an Asian America West Coast time slot. I'm not sure whether that is feasible anyway. So we thought there's a bit of response, but it's a good point. We try to address it as good as possible. Good. These were quite a few good points, and of course the follow-up question is always and what could be better? What are the points that could be improved, or what you would be critical about if there would be a next organizer or a next round of online of the online conference?
Just as Thomas mentioned, the timing, you know, it's always difficult to organize a conference when no other major conferences are happening. But this particularly was challenging for us with the SAP team because most people were at COP.
I'm sorry, they were what?
Most of the team members were at COP27, so could not attend today.
Yeah. So then what would have been, because this is, I think, the most international working group, or the most international or diversified, would have been for this session a better time than this one?
Maybe outside of COP or outside any major conference, online conference.
But I really mean, what would be, say, if you would want to solve that, what would be the best time to have had this session? Apparently we have overlooked a few things.
I don't know, maybe next week, or there's not really a perfect time, as you said.
Oh, okay, so that's, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I have another meeting to go to. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present SAP and to maybe inspire some of the SSCP members to join our working groups as well.
Likewise,
Thank you.
I also have another meeting to attend from Bridges, so one of our team members is the director, so
okay.
Yeah, that would be anyway a short plenary. We only have planned it till so we used most of the time.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your views. That makes at least a start to us. And of course, well, to wrap this up, thank you for staying till the end. And of course, we want to thank the local organizers, which are based in Taiwan, which did a great job together with the Kyoto Institute. So without their support and facilitation, this would not have been possible. So we really want to thank them very much for supporting and enabling this online event.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Also on behalf of all the participants that could not be here, because there's always more work than you think, and we really relied on that, and it really worked as well. Also for you, Charles.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for joining this section. Yeah, thank you.
Great.
Thanks all for joining the session.
All right, see you everybody.
See you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Jaco.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Well, Stephen, I think there's not so much for us to talk about. Yeah. You have a nice background.
Yeah. I guess just to say where I am in the world. So yeah.
Yeah. Actually, it's quite close to Rotterdam.
You know the site. Okay, good.
Oh, you don't know it. There's only.
I just